Greetings and welcome to Creation in Crisis. We are a webinar sponsored by Creation Spirituality Communities that meets on the first Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We feature speakers who are exploring the nexus between spirituality, cosmology, and activism, which align with the three vocations of creation spirituality: mysticism, creativity, and transformation. This series is offered to the broader creation spirituality community to aid us in responding to our environmental crisis from a spiritual approach, as people who hold the earth and all life sacred. Our speakers address this crisis in creation through their experiences with environmental law, earth activism, research, spiritual practice, science, cosmology, community organizing, and the arts. Your hosts for this session are me, Bob Eisenberger. I'm in Toronto on land ceded from the Mississaugas of the Credit River Nation, which is part of the Great Lakes bioregion, and also Penny Andrews from the Great Lakes bioregion, ceded from the Ho-Chunk people. Our usual host, Gail Sophia Ransom, is off on a well-deserved holiday in California for a family wedding, and so we are doing the best we can to replace her valued hosting. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Penny, who has a few words and will introduce our guest for the day.
Oh, it's lovely to see everyone here today. I thought I'd open with a poem from Mary Oliver and honor the beautiful blue iris, in this case purple, that's growing and flourishing in my part of the world as everything greens in an explosion of life. So I invite your breath to slow, your belly to soften as we enter in this time together, releasing anything that doesn't serve you in this moment for this one-time experience of being together. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot, or a few small stones. Just pay attention. Then patch a few words together. And don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. She says it so well and so simply. Well, we're thrilled to have Lauren Van Ham with us today. Our lives kind of overlapped a little bit during UCS years, but Lauren came at it at a much younger age, and as a result has been gifting the world her talents and wonderful offerings. And just to give you a little sense of it, in a blog that's no longer active, but still very worth your time, she writes, "My eco-chaplain story began in 2007 when I recognized that caring for the earth had become my deep love in ministry. I left my work as a hospital chaplain and sought endorsement from my seminary to renew my ordination vows and profess myself an eco-chaplain. I arrived at the name feeling deep love and deep dread. What does it mean when our earth is so ravaged that it too, like a prison or army barracks, needs a chaplain? And what was I really proposing to do? Through this work, I was reminded again that a chaplain's call is to bring connection, to prophetically state, here and now, No matter how set apart, lost, or beyond love this place may appear, the source of our breath abides here too. Looking for God or honoring the mystery in a variety of settings is the work of a chaplain. Just as the chapel stands apart from a church or temple, a chaplain endeavors to create sacred space in the freestanding complexity of hospitals, campuses, military bases, and corporations. And it's a great segue to inviting Lauren to speak, because now in her current role as Climate Action Coordinator for the United Religions Initiative, Lauren is bringing to the world what she names her chaplaincy call. Lauren, welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you for sharing that definition of eco-chaplaincy. Sometimes we write things and it's years later when we go back to them and say, oh, yeah, that's it. That's good. So I'm glad that you just spoke those words again, like Mary Oliver invited. I am happy to see some friends here today, friends, faces I have known for a while, and I am also really happy to see all of you whom I have not yet met. And I was at the University of Creation Spirituality, the Oakland campus, as it was becoming Naropa. So there was just a short period of time. My master's degree comes from Naropa, and it was a kind of a magical moment for the school because we were studying the Western mystics, while in Boulder, Colorado, they were studying the Eastern, and there was just kind of this beautiful bridge, right? But in the material that I share today, you will absolutely hear the 4 paths of creation spirituality. It's impossible, I think, not to hear them. And the 4 paths of creation spirituality continue to inform nearly everything I do. So I was delighted when I was invited to be with you all today. This feels like a homecoming, and it connects me to my root system, which is absolutely informed and continues to have life breathed into it because of the time that I spent at UCS and the friends that I still have from that period in my life, and the way that creation spirituality weaves through my own theology and practice now. So it's just great to be with you all. What I want to talk about today is kind of a startup that I have been creating with a team of people, mostly here in the Bay Area. It's called Project Adapt. And Project Adapt comes out of the work that I'm suspecting quite a few of you are maybe somewhat familiar with. It's been coined deep adaptation. And Jem Bendel is a man from the United Kingdom who a number of years ago, he was teaching in a sustainable MBA program. And in 2018, he wrote a paper that really kind of said, look at all of the signs around us that are pointing to societal breakdown. Look at all of the disruption in the world around us. Can we really, in good conscience, continue to be touting sustainable development when so many things that we had hoped would intersect and create this pathway forward, it's just, they're not coming together quickly enough. It's not working. And what can we do to start talking about this disruption and this breakdown so that people are showing up with love and care and in the midst of things breaking down? Now, many of you will hear, as I'm describing this, you will hear the words of Joanna Macy. You will hear the words of the Great Turning, right? Because we know that as the Great Turning, we are invoking the Great Turning is happening, and it is happening simultaneous to the Great Unraveling. And so very, very soon after Jem Bendel wrote a paper in 2018, he and Joanna Macy met. And so there are also wonderful similarities in some of the deep adaptation framework and the work that reconnects. So those of you who have familiarized yourself with the work that reconnects, you may be using it in your communities, you'll hear some of that in what I share today too. And in the chat box right now, I'm just going to share a little bit more about GEM so that I'm giving credit where credit is due. The links there, one of them takes you to the paper that he wrote in 2018, and I think that he has actually issued a second version now that's slightly amended. There's also a link to the Deep Adaptation Forum. What happened in 2018 is so many people read the paper and were moved by it that Jem and his team were sort of inundated. And the deep adaptation is in response to people saying, I think deep adaptation needs to be alive in agriculture. Well, I think deep adaptation needs to be alive in education. I think deep adaptation. And so when you go to the forum, you may feel yourself invited into these different places where maybe you even hold some specialization. And so I do encourage you, if something that you hear today really, comes alive in you, I encourage you to go to the Deep Adaptation Forum and just see if there are people there that you want to get in the sandbox with. They're all over the world. The forum is very alive and rich and happening in many different ways. So I think that means that I'm going to share my screen now and start taking you into what I call Project Adapt. Everyone seeing that okay? Great. As is the case with PowerPoint slides, there will be written words here that I want to give you time to take in. I'm not going to read it word for word, and I have some of my own notes of things that I want to share with you as well. But I do think that the framework that Jem proposes is rich enough that I wanted to offer some visuals today so that those of us who are visual learners can kind of bring all of our intelligences to this moment. When Jem talks about deep adaptation, he has used a 4R framework, and we'll talk about each one of those R's today. When I talk about deep adaptation, I've added a 5th R, and I think it's a really important R. It's coming through the lens of eco-chaplaincy for sure. It's reverence. I don't think that we can do any work of adaptation without having a source, without having a home where we return to and where we come from. So reverence isn't in the initial framework that is suggested, but when I teach deep adaptation in adaptation circles or in the eco ministry course, other places where I teach, I include reverence as the 5th R. Adaptation is a word that can be defined in a lot of different ways, of course. It's kind of like sustainable. It has gotten a little tricky because it can mean so many different things. But today, as we talk about Project Adapt, as we think of ourselves as adapters, I would like us to think about the definition of adaptation as a response. It's active, and it's not reactive so much as it's maybe even being with what is or getting out ahead a little bit of what is, because we're thinking about community care and we're thinking about making meaning. And those things feel really important so that we aren't just simply reacting, but we're responding. So let's go to reverence. If reverence had a location, I might say that it happens at the level of the soul. There's a wonderful quote here by Charles Eisenstein, where he, is inviting us to think about the gateway to reverence as being enchantment. I think probably any of us who have studied creation spirituality, we know that sometimes reverence isn't only enchantment, it can also be awe. It can be a bit of fear or quaking, can also bring us into a state of reverence. But absolutely, reverence is a place where we know the everything and the no thing. And in reverence, we're honoring the deep source of life that is in us and beyond us and animating us. So this is reverence. Each of the R's in Project Adapt ask a question. And I believe that the way that we start to feel into or better acquaint ourselves with each of the R's is going to be both internal and external, right? There's sort of an internal experience, a way that we pray with it, we meditate with it, it works on us internally. And then there's the external manifestation of what it looks like when we're doing it in public. The question that reverence might ask of us is, in what ways and in what spaces can we recognize and reclaim reverence as a primary and trustworthy source of guidance? I want to suggest that some of the ways that we all would be sharing reverence more openly or more intentionally as we move through the world would be things like, well, we speak in metaphors constantly. And a lot of the metaphors that we might find ourselves using have been touched or influenced by technology, machinery. And so one of the ways that we can be more intentional about embodying reverence is by using metaphors that are ecological and alive and drawing upon our living system. Another way to be more applicable with our reverence would be to be presencing the sacred at meetings and gatherings, or honoring the people, the land, the watershed where we come from. I neglected to do that today. I'm in Chochenyo territory. I'm on Ohlone land. The Baxter Creek watershed is my source of water. I think it's useful for us to orient and root ourselves in those ways. So before we go any further, I want to give us a chance to really ground in reverence. Penny already did that a bit by offering patron saint Mary Oliver's words. But let's take a moment now. As you are comfortable, you might want to look out a window. If there's a way to see outside, you're welcome to do that. Or as you feel comfortable, you might just close your eyes. But let's just take a couple of deep breaths together. And in this place now, the dog is responding. In this place of stillness and spaciousness, I want to invite you to think of a place where you readily tap into your reverence. Might be a house of worship. It might be your garden. It might be holding a grandchild. But find yourself in this place where reverence is pulsing for you. And I'm going to ask a series of 4 questions. Each of the questions uses the word you. And I encourage you to put in that space of you the being that is most right for you, whether it is life itself or Buddha nature or God or Christ, goddess, whatever is right for you. And as you are being with each of these questions, I remind all of us that the gut response is the right answer. So we don't need to overthink this. In this place of reverence, the first question is, what do you want me to receive? What do you want me to receive? The second question is, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to know? What do you want me to let go of? What do you want me to let go of? And finally, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? So if you want to, you're welcome to jot down a response to those questions. We're not going to be sharing them in any direct way in what we're doing today, but they might be a roadmap for you in some of the questions that I ask as we move forward. As always, I invite you to thank this place that you've been. Thank this source of reverence for letting it be, for allowing you to be with it for a while, knowing that you can always return to it at any time. Thankful for the wisdom and answers that it maybe has provided. So thank you, reverence. And as you're ready, feel free to come back. Thank you for being with me in reverence for a while. So moving now more directly into the R's of adaptation, relinquishment is in the framework. These aren't going in any particular order. You might think about them like the stages of grief. They are all interdependent. They're all integral in how we arrive and be and heal. But relinquishment, if we were thinking about this in terms of creation spirituality, would probably be the space of via negativa. And it allows us to assess what and where we might be able to let go of things. It's also the place of grief and lament, which is so necessary, right? And then interestingly enough, sometimes if we allow ourselves to enter into the grief and sorrow, we know that there sometimes can also be release or relief or freedom. And that is the substance of relinquishment. The question that relinquishment might ask, or we might ask ourselves when we are experiencing a prompt to relinquish, is in what ways can people and communities let go of certain assets, behaviors, and beliefs in order to not make matters worse? So again, thinking about societal breakdown or climate crisis, there might be some really obvious ways that we would carry things out in a public space. For example, in the United States, we're hearing quite a bit about infrastructure. What are the ways that government and infrastructure want to support withdrawing from coastlines or shutting down vulnerable industrial facilities? Certainly stopping practices that are extractive or exploitative. But then there can be other things too that we really endeavor to work with, like giving up our expectation for certain kinds of consumption. Certain things that maybe were readily accessible, but they were readily accessible because there was a high cost. And so do we start to relinquish ourselves from having those? And then, then there's also honoring the grief and loss, which some cultures do better than others. I was really touched a few years ago when I heard that the people of Iceland were gathering and sharing in a eulogy for a glacier that no longer existed. What are the liturgies? What are the prayers that could be born of this time as we are trying to honor the unthinkable? Because it's unthinkable what's happening. What are the funerals that need to be created for species who are extinct? And what kinds of support can we be providing for those who need to have a funeral for generations of job security in coal, which is going away? How can we provide support for that sort of transition and that sort of change? These are the ways that we would be bringing the work of relinquishment into a more public, intentional space. Restoration is an R that feels often more pleasant. We like to be able to jump in and get our hands dirty and feel like we have been a part of a change for the more healing, a change for the better. Restoration is definitely positiva space in the creation spirituality paths. It allows us to bring internal restoration, even as we are doing work of external restoration, like that feeling you have after you've been out in the garden after a day, or you volunteered and helped a child learn to read. There's something that has been restored externally, and we're also internally restoring ourselves. We practice restoration because we have the faith or the sense that it's a really right and good way to be alive. That's what motivates us in the space of restoration. The question for restoration is, what can we bring back to help us with the coming difficulties and tragedies? And what I mean when I say, what can we bring back? Well, we know that there's ancient wisdom. We know that there's traditional knowledge. So some of it is about bringing that back into this braid, so that we're braiding this all together. There are things that we didn't mean to set down, but sort of did. That kind of got buried in our inbox, so to speak. See, I just did it. That was a technological metaphor. So what are the ways that it got lost in maybe the compost bin? And we need to turn the compost and bring back these ways to help us with coming difficulties and tragedies. So some ways that restoration goes into the public sphere would be like planting ceremonies or harvesting ceremonies, any of the work that we might be doing to rewild our landscapes, recognizing fire tenders, earth keepers, water protectors, really elevating and uplifting these practices as restorative and helping to heal the whole. From an infrastructure or a more governmental space, we could think about What are we doing to reinstitute the commons? Are we tending boundaries, or are we maintaining borders, right? Some of these geopolitical conversations are really important. Can we design systems that center on the least of these? And how could we navigate hurt and harm without going into policing or correctional facilities, thinking about things like restorative justice and that sort of work? And then there are more things that we hear about locally and regionally, and you all, I know, are already doing so many of these things around growing local economies, practicing communal care, rediscovering non-electrical forms of play, non-electrical powered forms of play, singing, dancing, artwork, all of that stuff. Art as meditation, the things that we were doing at UCS. This is all about restoration. Reconciliation is the third R in the R framework. And reconciliation is the space of the via transformativa. It's the place where we feel the pain and the injustice in the world, and we do the really important work of repair and forgiveness and integration. Wherever possible, we're asking ourselves, where can we be more loving? Where can we appreciate this moment as fully as possible right now by exercising trust or generosity or even celebration? So reconciliation is, about social transformation and social justice, but it's also about reconciling ourselves to, in Mary Oliver's words, our one wild and precious life. I know that I'm not going to be in my body forever. I know that even if I live to be 100, it's not actually all that long. And so how do I reconcile myself to this one temporary, amazing, miraculous life I have and do good and understand that consuming more isn't helping me live longer? We've got our wires crossed a bit in the Western world around how we work hard to preserve, when in fact maybe we should just be generously spending. It's a giveaway, and that's kind of a part of the reconciliation space as well. So the question that we're invited to think about when we're visited by reconciliation, or when we're experiencing it: how might we live and die well and with love by acknowledging that we are part of the cause and part of the solution? And publicly, this looks like a lot of things. It's about finding greater reconciliation between people, genders, classes, generations, countries, religions, political persuasions. It's the hard work. It's the work that we see in the headlines a lot. And to quote David Corton and Joanna Macy, it is the revolution that will not be televised. This is the hard work that we're doing. Reconciliation can also look like the work that we're doing to care for the more than humans. So not just the two-leggeds, right? But the winged and the creepy crawlies and the finned, all of the trees, the rocks, the land masses. What are we doing to give personhood to the rivers? What are we doing to pay? In my area, it's the Ohlone people. We pay a Shumi tax. I think in Seattle, there's the Duwamish rent. There are community land trusts. There's watershed discipleship. I'm sure many of you know about these projects and are carrying them out in places where you live, but these are all acts of reconciliation. And then at a most, kind of primal level, theologically speaking, in a Buddhist framework, it's about working with my own death, realizing that I am here for however long I have, and can I really confront that in a way that's fruitful for me, so that I'm living my best life now. Reconciliation. The final R in the R framework is resilience. Resilience, if it has a location, is the spirit. So if reverence is the soul, resilience is the spirit, and they go hand in hand. Reverence and resilience need each other. I would say that resilience is the space of the via creativa. It's the place where our prayer becomes most active. And the thing about resilience is that it really becomes resilient because it has touched the other R's. When we have really been through a relinquishment process, we become more resilient. When we have exercised restoration, we emerge knowing something about resilience that we didn't know previously. And the same is true with reconciliation. When we are more reconciled, we have become more resilient. So resilience is like a serpent winding its way through all of the R's, holding and weaving them together. And in the language of Joanna Macy, kind of some of her systems theory works, it's not a destination, right? Resilience is evolving, and it's kind of this emerging space that we come to again and again. It demonstrates our capacity. It demonstrates our potential. And one of the ways that I like to talk about this at Project Adapt is that resilience is applied reverence. So in your time with reverence today, you were working with those 4 questions. Perhaps if you started to apply the answers that you received in that meditative space today, it would give you some arrows pointing you toward resilience. Resilience is applied reverence. And resilience asks us, a really alive and active question. Knowing that we cannot stop climate chaos, in what ways can we adapt to the changing circumstances and then adapt again and again and again? It's super dynamic, resilience. Resilience is also best done in communities. There are many examples now of these resilience centers or resilience hub, sometimes they're being called. And probably some of you have been a part of them. Cooling centers in places where there are heat waves, warming centers in places where it's cold and people need a place to sleep at night. Certainly in the western part of the United States, there are more and more power grids and generators so that when wildfires come through and power outages occur, there are still places where people can find electricity. So these are examples of community resilience in an infrastructural sort of way. But there are also ways that resilience needs to be born now by cultivating trust, by listening to one another, by discovering simplicity and joy and living happily together with fewer resources and less certainty. These are sort of the teachings and the things that we want to be modeling around resilience. So here's sort of a picture of how all of the R's are working together. We have, reverence here at the center, and relinquishment and restoration and reconciliation are all in their own swirl together. And resilience, even though this picture doesn't quite do it, we could imagine, like I was saying, it's this serpent. It swirls through it all. And just like in the stages of grief, because we know that we're going to touch into all of them, we can then just start to sensitize ourselves to, well, what's feeling real in this moment? Is this moment a reconciliation moment? Is this moment a relinquishment moment? And sometimes the questions that are in the R's are helpful for me when I'm trying to figure out what am I being invited to do right now? What would be right action for me in this moment? What would allow me to feel less numb or less afraid or more responsive? Sometimes I find that I can plug in a little bit better when I return to these questions. So I'm just going to read them again for us. Reverence asks, in what ways can we recognize and reclaim reverence as a primary and trustworthy source of guidance? Relinquishment, where in our lives can we give up certain assets, behaviors, and beliefs in order to not make matters worse or even to feel more free? Restoration, what traditional or ancient wisdom can we bring back or restore to help us with coming difficulties and tragedies? Reconciliation, as part of the cause and the solution, with whom and what can I make peace to lessen suffering and to live more lovingly? And resilience, as changes increase or grow more severe, in what ways can we adapt and then adapt again and adapt again? Because resilience is our applied reverence. It brings us back home. Are you ready to adapt? Are you already adapting? From a Project Adapt space, I have 3 suggestions. So as I said previously, Project Adapt is a startup, but we host Project Adapt circles. And in the circles are usually like a 4-week series, but in the circles, we spend more time with the R's as a framework. And there are a few other kind of teaching tools and components that we bring in, but the circle is an opportunity to just go a little bit more deeply into some of these ideas, and then think about how we might bring a more adaptive design to our community. It could be a neighborhood, it could be a house of worship, it could be a school. But how can we bring more adaptation into our locality? So, sorry. So joining a Project Adapt circle is a way to learn more, and usually then people emerge from that circle training as a convener themselves. They maybe then start teaching some of the Project Adapt work. Something that you could just do on your own is work with the 8 practices of adaptation. I will put this link into the chat box. It's going to take you to a Google, oops, sorry about that. It's going to take you to a Google Doc. And the 8 practices of adaptation are a little bit like the 12 steps, or if you are familiar with the Good Grief Network, it's a little bit like that, but they are 8 invitations for us to orient ourselves around reconciliation, relinquishment, resilience, and seeing both our powerlessness and our invitation to engage in a problem that can feel so massive, so overwhelming. The 8 practices allow us to kind of zero in and think a little bit about how can I bring this into my spiritual practice and start to hold the magnitude of how big this is. So I will put that in the chat box. And then the other thing is just to stay in touch, because I really like hearing from you all, and finding ways that we can continue to share any part of this that is useful. hopefully you're hearing how readily it overlaps with things, whether it's transition towns or work that reconnects. There's tons of interplay and conversation and dancing that happens in all of these spaces, which is really good because we need all of it right now, right? It isn't about competition. It's about the more the merrier. And so let's share this and collaborate together as much as possible. So before we go into some conversation together and Q&A, again, just presencing these questions today, returning to reverence. We begin with reverence, we return to reverence. If any of what you heard today in response to these questions is helping you see maybe where you are on the map of the R's or in the spiral of the work that reconnects, that would make me happy, that this is serving as a compass for you in some way, and that maybe there's a place where you feel like you're ready to kind of plug in and provide some love, provide some care, because a lot of beings really need it. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and we have a lot of time for questions and sharing, and I want to invite people to bring whatever is on your head and heart into the forum here.
Marvelous. Thank you, Lauren, so much. Just a couple of housekeeping details as we get started. If you are not already back into gallery view, you may want to put yourself there so that we can see as many of each other at once as possible. And if you have a question or a comment, I would direct you please to the Zoom toolbar, usually at the bottom of your screen. One of the buttons you'll see says reactions. If you click that, and we're looking not for the hand, but look for the words raise hand, that will put a little icon on your picture, on your video, and put you in the upper left-hand corner of the screen so that I can see you. And I'll be happy to call on you one at a time so we can hear from everybody that has something to say.
I think one thing that might be fruitful, Bob, is to also bring forward ways that something you're already involved in is resonating with the words. So I know, for instance, Margie was just out doing an action. And Margie, if you have words for what happened there, that I look at that, you know, it's not a large group of people, but she's standing for the earth within her hometown, I believe. And it looks like it takes a lot of guts to do that. But Margie, could you say something about what you receive from doing actions like that?
Thank you, Penny. Well, I am a member of Extinction Rebellion, and we from time to time create actions that really help, hopefully, wake people up who are moving past. And like, for example, there were only 5 of us who were there this week, but we've just had a big election in Australia. It's the most positive election we've had in a long while. And we've got so many people who are behind wanting to do something about climate. And we didn't want our Deputy Prime Minister to forget. So his office is in our town. So that's why we met there. And it was absolutely exciting because one of our requests was to I don't know what you call it in America, but you know, when you to toot your horn is that what you call it in America?
Mm-hmm.
When going by, and mostly everybody pressed their car horn and said yes, they agree with climate action. It's not a big deal. We got together. We use social media ways to connect with each other and talk to each other about this. Yeah. And while I'm speaking, Lauren, thank you so much. That was brilliant what you've just shared, and I just love the work of Gem's work. And here you are bringing it to us in such an accessible way. Thank you.
Happy to do it, and Marjorie, celebrating with you. I'm sure many of us are celebrating with Australia.
Yeah,
I was able to.
Oh, we are just over the moon. We've had such a terrible time in the desert with dreadful leadership, and it's so lovely to have a new face for justice. Thanks for asking me, Penny.
Thanks, Margie.
I'll give people a chance to respond to that, but I'm remembering too, Penny, that you and I spoke beforehand about what is Gem doing now, and so I'll just address that briefly. And again, more in the chat box. Sorry, I know sometimes that can get overwhelming, but Gem has worked with scholars from around the world to create the Scholars Warning. And so people with doctorate level titles have signed on to a letter where they are saying, this isn't the time to be talking about sustainable development. It is absolutely the time to be talking about how we are going to respond as extreme weather events continue, as disasters increase. And let's really figure out ways that we can show up with our love and care instead of violent retaliation. And so in this letter, any of you who have a doctorate, please consider signing this letter. And you might also be interested in watching just the short video where different scholars from around the world are actually reading what the letter says. So that's there for you if you're interested.
Great.
Yes.
Lauren, could you just say a word about what your current role is with URI?
Sure. Yeah. So the United Religions Initiative is an international interfaith organization. It specializes on grassroots action. So there are cooperation circles around the world, and these cooperation circles need to be interfaith in order to be validated as a cooperative circle. And that includes indigenous belief systems, as well as world religions that we recognize, or different spiritual practices. And these cooperation circles are doing grassroots action to bring about gender equality, to restore Earth, and to do other forms of interfaith peace building. And I serve as the climate action coordinator. So on any given day, I have just the gift of hearing about what's happening in other parts of the world and the good news stories that we're sometimes not hearing about in mainstream media. But I am happy to share with you all that there are some very, very good things happening in addition to a lot of the scary things that we hear about. I'm curious if this is familiar information. I'm wondering, even just with a show of hands, if some of you are teaching or involved with work that reconnects with Joanna Macy's work. Yeah. Okay. And what about deep adaptation? Is Jem Bendel a new name, or okay? Yeah. Yeah. So I just found that when I read his paper, because he was willing to identify some of the things that feel really scary to talk about, because he was willing to just put them out there, that I felt a sense of relief. I found the framework to be something that was useful and tangible. And maybe in part because I felt like I saw creation spirituality in each of the 4 directions as well. I don't know if that's true for any of you other creation spirituality junkies, but it was true for me.
Wait, Lauren, we do have a raised hand. A question for Victoria Marie.
Yes, I wanted to just say a bit about what's happening in British Columbia and Canada. Our government just put a 20 billion more into Trans Mountain Pipeline, and before COVID, there were a lot of people protesting the pipeline. It's still going on, but not as many people. And I was part of over 250 people who got arrested in 2018 protesting the pipeline. And now my health doesn't allow me to actively participate, but I support the water and land defenders at Wet'suwet'en, where they're trying to put in a gas line which will pollute one of the last remaining pristine rivers in British Columbia. And here, I haven't heard of these organizations that you mentioned, but there is really interfaith and interdenominational cooperation in protesting these things that are destroying the more than human world. So, but thank you for this. I've taken copious notes.
Victoria, thank you for standing up in the ways that you have. I was going to say thank you for getting arrested, and I don't exactly mean that, but thank you for standing up in the way that you have and joining in solidarity with so many people. I was just on a call yesterday about a pipeline that is being proposed, which will be through the national park of Uganda. And fortunately, there was a lot of really, really powerful divestment activism happening. So a bunch of the banks pulled out because they said we can't fund it. It's still kind of on the table, so we all need to be raising our voices and saying things. But the pipelines they're awful.
Yeah, we protested a lot of the funders of the pipeline here, and that's why, and I can't understand that. And this is why the government is spending the 20 billion, because insurers and financiers of TMX, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, are pulled out. So it's heartbreaking. Not that they pulled out, but that the government's putting money in it.
Can I just interject here that Third Act, that one of their 2 primary go-tos is putting pressure on the banks, because they're the ones behind the funding of projects like pipelines. And if you haven't gone to their website, thirdact.org, the heat is building on this, and because it's geared for people 60 and older, there is a lot of financial pressure to be borne by people of a certain age. And so I just want to underscore what you're saying, that this is an action that makes a difference.
Scrolling to see if I see any other hands raised.
Yeah.
I just received a message in the chat about just some career changes that might be afoot. And it is reminding me of Penny's opening words where she was describing what an eco-chaplain is, at least through the lens I use. And I would really like many of us to consider ourselves eco-chaplain. I don't consider that term to be precious. I don't consider that term to be special. I think many of us are doing the work of eco-chaplaincy, and I think we should put that stole on and get out there. So all of us can be eco-chaplains, and we need a lot of eco-chaplains right now as grandparents, as teachers, as engineers. Y'all come, we need you. Farmers, all eco-chaplains as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
So, Lauren, it's saying something about Jim, because I think he came to this from such an interesting point of view at such a pivotal time when we needed a new voice. And he comes from, isn't he a designer of some kind? That was his original, like,
He's a business guy. He was doing a work around, say, for example, sustainable fishing. I think of him as sort of a Peace Corps. He was a sustainable development guy. And then as he was really putting the equation together, he had one of those oh no moments that many of us have in our careers where we say, maybe I have been like talking crap all this time. Maybe this isn't actually going to work. And in that come to Buddha moment, he wrote this paper. And what's interesting is that many of his colleagues said, this is a fine paper, Jem, but we don't know what to do with it because it's not academic. We don't know where to house it. We don't know what to do. So at that point, he really kind of had to shift gears. And I would say he's not exactly teaching business anymore. He's still teaching communications. He's still teaching, how do we talk about this? How can we, in some ways, demystify or debunk the idea of sustainability, even leadership? He's really been trying to kind of dismantle some of the myth around leadership and saying, we really need good leaders right now. And you don't have to be a massive change maker to create one change that is worthy of your leadership. So if you think that you can lead one thing really well, go do that, because we really need it. I'm curious if I can put Sally Swan on the spot, because I know that in her own right, Sally is doing some work around eco-chaplaincy and is an eco-chaplain as well as a chaplain in other settings. And I'm just curious, Sally, if something that you're hearing today is feeling really relevant in the way that you're living out your vocation, doing your call.
Thank you, Lauren. It's awfully nice to see you again. I know Lauren from the Chaplaincy Institute, where in October I was ordained as an interfaith chaplain, and Lauren was the dean there at the Institute. I'm new to creation spirituality, and I'm really glad that I came upon it. And I can see the need for recognizing via negativa so much, and the hope is the via transformativa. And we have so much work to do, so much denial. So I appreciate creation spirituality. I appreciate the Chaplaincy Institute. My main passion at this point, and Lauren, I'm not sure if I've kept up to date a little bit on this, is animal chaplaincy and advocating for animals, and spreading the word about speciesism. And this might not be the forum for that, but as you make your choices throughout the day, see if you can make choices that are healthy for our non-human beings that share Earth with us. Thank you.
I see Kevin's hand. Can I just respond quickly to Sally and then we'll go to you? The Sustainable Development Goals, which I realize the United Nations has these 17 goals. Some of us have never heard of them. And in some countries, they are the Bible. So it's like blasphemous to not talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. I've only learned this through my work at URI. But the SDGs are wonderfully intersectional, and they maybe would, if we were able to attain them, they would take us toward perhaps something that would feel attainable, perhaps. But Mary Evelyn Tucker and other colleagues at the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, deep believers in the work of Thomas Berry and Brian Swim, all good colleagues of ours, they have also pointed out that the Sustainable Development Goals are for the two-leggeds. And there is speciesism in what we're trying to do here. And it is incredibly important what you've just said, Sally, this idea of animal ministry, plant ministry, land mass, and river ministry, so important. And I'm so grateful that you brought speciesism into the conversation. Thank you. Kevin.
And it's not so much for the well-being of our the animals that share our planet. It's also, if we try to move towards a plant-based diet, not only is it healthy for us and obviously saving the lives of animals, it's so much healthier for Mother Earth. We are spending so much resource, land and power and water and human energy on animal food for people. And if we just make little steps towards more of a plant-based diet, it will go a long way towards welfare for our earthly home.
Thank you, Sally. And Kevin, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren is my spiritual director. She's been my spiritual director for a couple of years at least. And it's been a wonderful experience. And this has been a wonderful talk, Lauren, very inspiring and thought-provoking and heart-stirring. Let's see, what do I say? I'm in this interesting place. I'm supposedly working on my dissertation, my proposal, and what I'm beginning to, the struggle that I'm having is that that intellectualism isn't enough, and I don't know, and what seems to be coming up for me is not only how do you speak from the heart and how do you speak from the body, how do you speak in the body, being, and all of this being in relation to the earth as well, earth and spirit. But I guess what I want to bring into this is, first of all, just the way that the systems that we generally work under are patriarchal, a particular form of masculinity that's patriarchal, and it's very linear, it's very top down, it privileges aspects of the mind over everything else. And in some of the meditations that I've done in relation to my dissertation, trying to figure out what it is that I'm doing, or if I even want to do it, the feminine has shown up and said, I need to be part of this. I need to be a part of this dissertation, I was just attending a class on, it was called Learning to Walk in the Dark. And it was all about allowing the ways of the feminine to come to be. I mean, it is coming forward. That energy of knowing intuitively and knowing. I don't even know the language, but hopefully you understand at least to some degree what I'm talking about, because I can't articulate it. But just this way of knowing that is inclusive, that is intuitive, that is embodied, is ensouled, that is deeply connected and deeply relational. And of course, the masculine can do this too. It's just the patriarchal version of it has distorted the ways that the masculine can participate in this. So I just want to bring that in because it's a question that's living in me. And as I sit with these 4 or 5 R's, you know, and wondering where I am in all of this, I think that I guess one of my questions is how can I guess reverence is what resonates for me most at this time, and how to bring that reverence into my work and my and in my intentions for whatever it is that I do next in the dissertation or something else. So I for that because it's here for me to offer.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. I want to reflect back that I heard you say intellectualism isn't going to cut it, right? That we can, I feel this often, that I can know so much and it doesn't really matter if I haven't walked it, if I haven't lived it, if I haven't loved it. And those who have lived close to the earth know this. And we're all being invited into that space more and more now. You know, the word is indigeneity, finding our indigeneity. That just feels so important. And as you were talking, Kevin, I was hearing a body prayer that I learned from Michael Mansfield at UCS. I saw you were here, Michael. I'm so happy. The soul loves the body. They are one, they are one. The soul loves the body, my soul, right? All together, they reverence and resilience, they need each other. Yeah, thank you.
I would just add to Kevin's comments that it sounds an awful lot like he's touching on deep time thinking, that connectivity, and there is no disconnect in the universe. So if you're of a mind, Kevin, take a look at Deep Time Network for the wisdom that they're offering there as well. Great point. Great point. Any, Lauren, you did mention that you get calls that are good news. And could we have a couple stories of good news? Just to prime the pump.
Absolutely. It's so important. Yeah, I mean, one of my good news stories was Australia elections. I just think that that's so fantastic. And so I'm grateful for that. On Sunday of this week, June 5th, it's World Environment Day. And again, I think in the United States, we're sometimes a little oblivious to the international days that the UN has put on the map for us. But many cooperation circles through URI in other countries believe deeply in these international days and really rally to do something. And so that's top of mind for me right now, because we've got all of these headlines coming in around what people are doing for World Environment Day. In Malawi, there has been an effort to plant more than 30,000 trees in an area that has been completely deforested. Their rivers are drying up and they are out of firewood for their fires. The girls are walking more and more miles to get to wood to bring home to cook with. And that means that they're not in school. So, you know, this very complex problem has developed over the years. And now the indigenous chiefs and the imams and the priests and the rabbis are working together and planting more than 30,000 trees on farms, the properties of houses of worship, certain people's yards. And because they were funded by a group in Italy that's doing some cool work, they're called Treedom, like freedom, but Treedom, is built in that the trees that they plant actually will be tracked so that they survive. It isn't just a good faith effort, the tree goes in the ground and then it perishes, but all of these seedlings will actually be tracked and will hopefully live, and Malawi landscape will look very different as a result of that. There are also some incredible efforts happening around beekeeping, which I think is a really important mention as we are thinking about speciesism, both in, in the South African regions again, but lots of Latin American and Caribbean countries are realizing that it's great to grow vegetables, but in some ways it's even more important to grow flowering plants and to really, really make sure that the pollinators are being fed. So there are some fantastic efforts happening around beekeeping. And then the story that I mentioned about the pipeline coming through Uganda, I think in the countries where the socioeconomic privilege ranks mighty and powerful, there's also some phenomenal work happening around divestment and holding insurance companies accountable, especially as floods are becoming more pervasive, as fires are becoming more pervasive. What are we doing to make sure that the insurance industry doesn't just run amok with this stuff? So there are some really important conversations happening with cooperation circles in a few countries in Africa, definitely Australia. And if people are interested in knowing a little bit more about some of these things, I would be happy to receive an email from you. Maybe what I'll do is I will put my URI email address in the chat box. And I think there are a few people here from URI today too. I saw Will McGarvey. Hi, Will. But if people are interested in some of that work, you're welcome to contact me there. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Margie. Regenerative agriculture. That's another thing that's happening with cooperation circles that is fantastic. These efforts to really build up the soil using permaculture principles, bringing back places that have been, hugely desertified. Many cooperation circles are doing that work too. And that is really good news story, huge good news story. Yeah, and some of the other things that we all know are really important, like banning plastic, cleaning up coastlines, that sort of thing. Some really, really good things going on.
I saw something yesterday that just was, and it was on PBS News, so it had wide audience. And it was that coral is being regenerated with probiotics. It was an accident, complete accident, and there were women biologists involved, but it's this painstaking sort of coating the coral with probiotics and stepping back And all of a sudden, 30 days later, there's life. And it's so exciting. And, you know, it's that part of us that, you know, if we could get a coherent global message that we need to take actions, it just feels like that creativity is bubbling below the surface, just ready to. So, yeah, amazing time.
That feels like an important thing to say, and maybe this is a good place to end. I don't know, but you know, one of the ways that Jem Bendel's work is being critiqued is because he uses the word collapse. So, you know, even just as I say it, I mean, notice where in your body you feel that when I say that word. And you know, in some ways, because he's a communications guy, he's using that word very intentionally because it's powerful and evocative. But I also really appreciated years ago when I heard Joanna Macy say, if anyone tells you that they know what's happening or what's going to happen, they're lying, because none of us can know. And that brings me back to reverence. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It keeps me humble. It keeps me curious. It keeps me courageous. It's inviting. I can continue to bring myself with love and care to what is showing up. And it can feel at times like it is collapsing. It can feel at times like it is breaking down, but I don't actually know. And my practice with reverence allows me to stay alive and committed in the midst of it.
That's beautiful. Margie is recommending collapsing consciously. Well, Lauren, what a fantastic sharing today. I know you have some, well, let me just ask one more. Does anyone have any last comments before we draw today to a close? Do we have any hands going up? Even the least of the things. If not.
Not seeing any.
Okay. All right. Well, would you like to send us off, Lauren?
I would like to sing a song. This was the song that Gina Rose sang to me when I said I was going to become an eco chaplain. And it scared me to say it because I didn't know what that word meant. She said, I have a song for you. So Gina Rose, in case you don't know, Gina Rose founded the Chaplaincy Institute, but she graduated. She's was a doctorate candidate at the University of Creation Spirituality. So this is the song. May your life be blessed like a tree. May your soul be wrapped in greenness. May your roots be long. May your shoots be strong. May your soul be wrapped in greenness. May you bear good fruit and flowers and leaves. May you grow with strength and courage. May you lift your branches to the sky, to the sun, and through the seasons. May your life be blessed like a tree. May your soul be wrapped in greenness. May your roots be long. May your shoots be strong. May your soul be wrapped in greenness. Thank you all so much. It was wonderful to be with you today.
What a gift, Lauren. Thank you so much for being there and being CS in important places, doing important things, and then spreading it and encouraging and enlivening us all. Oh, what a gift. What a gift.
Please take excellent care of yourselves and go be the eco chaplains that you already are.
It's an inspirational phrase. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much.
I would just let everyone know, in case you are not familiar with us at Creation in Crisis, and if this is new to you, I would just point out that we have a website on the Creation Spirituality Communities website. I've got the address circled there. If you just go to cscommunities.org, we're visible from the homepage, and should be easy to find. You can also find us on Facebook if you are on that social media model, Creation in Crisis, and join, like that page, and see postings there throughout the month. And we also are on YouTube. You can find recordings of all of our past speakers. If you just go to the YouTube and search for Creation Spirituality Communities, and you'll find there a playlist named Creation in Crisis. If you got a pencil
I want to
handy.
get out.
There's various ways to stay in touch with us.
And Lauren's recording of this will be up in the next few days.
Yes, generally they're up within about 24 hours. So you're welcome to catch up with a repeat of Lauren's wisdom or other prior speakers. So
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Next month we have Sarmeet Kumal coming, and he is going to be teaching, and I'm so excited to hear what he has to share with us next month on quantum wisdom. He's a physicist who has been active in deep time and has a course coming up that he's titled Quantum Wisdom, and he'll be sharing a bit about the overview of that and any other questions you might have about physics. So thank you all for being here and joining us. Anything else, Bob?
No, I was just, I'll stop recording in a second. I was just going to say, if our practice has been recently that if you want to hang around for a few minutes and just mingle and chat with friends and new friends, you're welcome to do that for a little bit.
Great. Well, blessings all.